Hello there, guys. Welcome to the Raw Reflections podcast. This is brought to you by the Mirror Impact. My name is Ariel Keller, and today we are going to be continuing our series on managing stress. For this week's podcast, we are going to focus specifically on tendencies and strategies. So basically our response to the stressors we've identified in our lives. So before we jump in today, I do want to make sure that you have seen the last two videos in this series. This is part 3. We are focusing on response, but I've done a video the last couple of weeks, one on modifying our mindset towards stress, and then the most recent one, identifying our stressors in the mind, the body, and the gut, and how we can set that up in a way that we can respond in a more beneficial way than just letting things fester or letting things take over our minds or our bodies. So if you have not given those a listen yet, go ahead and you should be able to find them in the description box. I will link them below. I'm also going to link a quiz to this, what we're going to talk about today for a brief moment, the 4 Tendencies quiz. So if you don't seem like you get an idea of what your tendency is, go ahead and take the quiz. You have a better idea of how you respond to expectations. And that's really what these tendencies boil down to, is how we respond to expectations. So we're going to jump right in today. I'm also going to be attaching a little nutshell guide. So if you are not wanting to take the quiz, but you want to get a better idea, or maybe you just need to get a better idea of how to manage or work with someone in your family that's has a different tendency than you, then this may be helpful, okay? So jumping right in, we're going to start with just a basic description. We have 4 different tendencies. I mentioned these last week's podcast. We have upholders, who want to know what should be done. They're good at following and meeting both internal and external expectations. Questioners want justification, so they only follow those rules that make sense in their minds. Obligers need accountability because they are better at upholding external expectations than internal ones. And then rebels want freedom to do something their own way. So they resist all expectations from other people, and sometimes the expectations they set on themselves. So diving in a little bit deeper, we're going to start with upholders. So if you are an upholder, if you readily meet, or I guess a person is an upholder if they readily meet external and internal expectations. They're self-directed. They can meet deadlines, work on projects, take an initiative without needing that supervision or accountability that other tendencies may need. They enjoy the routine, the schedules, the alarm clocks. They don't like to make mistakes. They're typically perfectionists, and because of that, they may become very angry or defensive when you suggest they've dropped the ball or done something wrong. And sometimes I feel this a little bit in the way that I will adapt to certain situations, or the way I'll react to certain situations. So they also may put high value on follow through and being able to accomplish what they said they were going to accomplish. And that's very important to them. They want to uphold the expectations they have set in that external sense of, oh, other people are expecting this of me. So they sometimes put a lot of pressure on themselves. They may sometimes need to be reminded that unlike them, others aren't necessarily comforted or energized by getting things done. Sometimes people need to relax, while upholders may just want to clean the house or may want to get something done and accomplished, so they have that sense of accomplishment. So not everybody's like that. So if you're an upholder, keep that in mind. And they may have also trouble delegating responsibilities because, as they may view it, no one can do the job like they can. So it is important to manage that mindset in that way of being able to release that pressure of needing to get everything done your way, by you and only you, all the time. All right? Delegation is key. Take some of that pressure off of yourself. Take some of that stress off of yourself. All right, so likely strengths for this upholder tendency is going to be either self-starter, they're self-motivated, they're conscientious and reliable people, so they will get things done, thorough, they follow through, they're eager to understand and meet expectations, and they follow rules and regulations and performance targets. And a lot of times those upholders will need some sort of an outlet to be able to do that. If they don't have an outlet, they're going to kind of go crazy. So they'll clean their house like crazy, or do something that requires them to be articulate or be or meet specific expectations. They almost seek out expectations to follow. Possible weaknesses for this tendency is going to be that they can sometimes become a little bit defensive, rigid. They get uneasy when it's not clear, so they don't respond very well to change, at least not at first. They have a hard time with change and with things not being the way that they should be. So if they have an expectation of something going one way and then it doesn't turn out that way, it can become very frustrating for this upholder tendency. So that's something to watch. And then they can also become impatient with other people who need reminders or deadlines or supervision or accountability, because they are like, well, why is it so hard for you to stay accountable? Why is it so difficult? They can become demanding or over analytical about certain situations or personality types. So these are a couple of things that you may want to watch out for if you are an upholder or you know an upholder. This would be something to maybe show them this podcast so they can learn on their own. Next tendency is the questioner. So questioners they always need justifications for what they're doing. So they only meet expectations if it makes sense to them. They follow the advice of authorities only if they trust their expertise. So even if it's an authority figure, they're not just going to follow the rules because they are supposed to follow the rules. They're going to follow the rules because they have respect for someone who knows more than them and they want to follow in their footsteps. And they also have, they follow their own judgment sometimes in when it comes to expertise versus what they think. Sometimes they won't even give a care about the expertise. A doctor saying this because they're like, well, I've justified this in my own mind. This makes sense to me, so that's what I'm sticking with. So they can become very, very, very stubborn. They question pretty much everything. They ask some of the questions that other people may not think to ask. My husband is a questioner, so when it comes to certain things that I'm working towards in my life, he'll be like, well, have you thought about this? Or have you thought about this? So that can be helpful to me, but it can also become overwhelming to people who are not questioners because they won't think to ask the questions a questioner would ask, or they won't think to follow through with something in the same way that a questioner would, so that then when they're reiterating the information, that questioner can become uneasy because they don't have all of that information. So if you are married to or you have a questioner in your life, that is something to keep in mind. I know I learned very early on, my mother's also a questioner, and I learned very early on if I was wanting to go to do something with friends, there were certain questions my mom would ask. Make sure I got my room clean, I did my chores, I did my homework, or whatever I needed to do that day. And if I was able to answer all of those questions, I would most likely be able to go to my friend's house or do whatever I wanted to do for fun that day. So I knew that that was an expectation she was wanting me to meet. So going in with that mentality was easier for me to not necessarily make her do things that I want her to do, but it was a way for me to communicate in a way that my mother understood, to show respect to her. And it also caused her to see me in a more respectful light as, as her child, and wanting to accommodate those wants because I had met those expectations she had of me already. Without even her asking those questions, I'd be like, all right, I answered this, 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 and this. So no questions needed to be answered. And that's the same way you can take it with business or with a client, is answering those questions before they even ask them. And then they're already informed and they feel more comfortable with you. Sorry, I went on a tangent there for a second. So they hate anything arbitrary, like 5 garments to a fitting room, or stopping at a red light in the middle of the night, or a stop sign in the middle of the night when there's no other cars. So those regular rules that people are just supposed to follow, they're like, well, that doesn't make sense. There's no logical reason behind that. I don't want to follow it. They may also dislike being questioned themselves, so they can sometimes get on the defense mode when they are questioned by other people. So sometimes questioners can get along, but if their personalities clash, they may find that they're getting annoyed with someone for asking so many questions when they do that themselves that they don't even realize it. They also may have trouble delegating a decision or making a decision because they suspect that others don't have a sufficient base for action. So if they're making a group decision or they're trying to coordinate with someone else, whether that be a spouse or a coworker, that can be a little bit frustrating for that other person because they're constantly wanting that additional piece of information. No matter how much information they get, they always want more. So be careful with that. If you're a questioner, be aware of that. If you're not, and you live or work with or have a questioner in your life. Likely strengths for this tendency is that they're data driven, so they're very good at those analytical jobs, those data analyst. That's what my husband does. He's really good at it because he likes to solve problems. He likes to ask questions and find out the answers. They're typically interested in creating systems that are efficient and effective so that they don't have to ask the same questions over and over again. It's just they kind of fits into this category. It's that, that Excel I don't even know what they're called. The formulas, there we go, Excel formulas that they put into the computer to be able to calculate certain factual data more efficiently. They're very much into that and creating those sorts of things. Questioners are always willing to play the devil's advocate, regardless of whether they believe in the questions they're asking. They're always interested in asking questions. So that could be the person in your group of friends who is constantly playing the devil's advocate just to start up a conversation, and that may seem like they're stirring up drama or they're stirring up division, but they don't see it like that in their mind. So it may be something that you need to bring up to them, that it does frustrate you in that regard. And I've had to do this with my husband too, because we'll be having a normal conversation and he'll bring up the devil's advocate, and I think he's trying to argue with me, and I'm not feeling it. I'm tired. I'm hungry. I'm not looking for a debate. And I've had to, and so I literally have my saying, I'll be like, hey babe, you're getting your debater tone with me. I'm not feeling that right now. Are you really asking these questions because you need to know, or are you just trying to play devil's advocate? So that's something that we've worked on together because he's had to adjust to my personality type, which I'm going to talk about next, or my tendency. They're also willing to they're very strong-willed and they're very determined, which is a great thing when it comes to striving for success, but they have to have a reason. So when it comes to weight loss or when it comes to working out, it has to make sense in their minds. And I say this a lot with women who are trying to get their husbands to work out, because y'all know it's been a journey. I can't make my husband do anything. I can't make him work out with me. It has to be his choice. And when it's not his choice, he doesn't want to do it. It has to be justified in his mind. And so I was asking him the other day, I was like, why do you like to work out? What would motivate you in understanding your questioner mentality? What is it about working out that makes you want to do it, want to create a habit? And he said, I like the way that it makes me feel. I like that it boosts my confidence, it makes me feel good, and it does give me that extra energy. But when he focuses on all of the other areas that it makes him feel, or he'll be done with work, and when he asks himself that question at the end of work, do I want to go work out? His automatic response is not going to be, yeah, let's go exert more energy. So he has to set that goal ahead of time and know those expectations, write down those expectations of what he's going to feel after he's gone through this habit and he's recreated this habit, because he knows the final result. that is the only thing that's going to motivate him towards those goals. I can't do that for him. I can remind him of these things, but until it's justified in his mind, he will not do it. So keeping that in mind when you're trying to encourage friends or family members who are trying to get fit or work out more. All right. Weaknesses for this person or this tendency is going to be that they can very easily suffer from paralysis analysis or overthinking, getting caught into that downward spiral of negative emotions because they're overthinking about things. They can be impatient with what they see others. They see others being complacent or what they would consider complacency. They're not going as quickly, or they're not pushing as hard or being as motivated as they may want them to be. And sometimes I actually fall into this. Personally, this isn't my go-to tendency, but I actually do get frustrated when I see people who say they want to accomplish something and they have these goals and they set these goals, but they refuse to take the action I've laid out in front of them in a very sustainable way. They refuse to take that action because they have something in their mind that is stopping them from justifying it, from justifying the 20 minutes a week that they would spend working on themselves. It has to make sense in their mind. And no matter what I do as a trainer, I could be motivating as motivating as the next trainer, or even more so, but until they make that choice in their own mind, they're not going to make change. So that is frustrating for me as a trainer because of that complacency element. But now that I'm able to understand these tendencies, it's better for me to target those specific people and help them understand their tendency and help them understand how to respond to the expectations, or how they respond to the expectations, so they can manage their action better, if that makes sense. So I'm going to try to, I know I'm already getting higher on the time. I knew this was going to be a longer podcast today. So bear with me. I'm going to try to crank through this as quickly as possible. So another possible weakness for these questioners is that they're unable to accept closure on certain matters that others may consider settled. So they will continue an argument 3 hours after the conversation is ended, and our other tendencies have moved on from the subject. We've completely shifted our focus. These questioners are still going through questions about why this happened, what triggered it, why this person's feeling this emotion. And that can become extremely annoying to other people because they're like, well, you're constantly bringing up the same subject over and over. So a great thing for questioners to work on is learning to release those things that pop up into their mind that tend to, I guess, linger there and cause you negative thoughts and negative emotions. Learning to release those and process those, whether that be through a journal or through speaking or singing or, any sort of poetry or written word or anything like that, rather than putting all of that stress on another person and questioning them until they break down and cry because they don't know why you continue to stay on the subject. Rather than doing that, learning to process your own emotions through a more beneficial avenue that is you and only you. It's not bringing in other people to solve it for you or answer your questions. It's answering the questions that linger in your own mind and learning to release the others that don't matter, okay? And understanding that difference. One of the key things that my husband and I agreed to focus on as a married couple was that we were never going to we didn't want an argument to get in the way of our relationship. Our relationship was more important than this little issue that we were frustrated about or we were discussing. And it would get out of hand and we'd be like, wait a minute, why are we still arguing about this? Why is this something that's still in conversation? Because it's only bringing up more frustration. So if you're taking that into consideration and you're focusing on that outward perspective of how does this seem to the other person, because that's a big frustration with the people that have questioners in our lives, is because we don't feel that you are you're focusing on us, it is if you are constantly focused on you. You're constantly focused on winning the argument, on winning the debate, on having your answers but it loses that sense of kindness at times for the people that are in your life. So be very, very cautious when it comes to this personality type. All right, I'm going to move on to obligers. So I am actually an obliger. Obligers meet other people's expectations a whole lot better than they meet their own. So this is the tendency that requires accountability more than anything else, external accountability. They put high value on meeting their commitments to other people, or even if they just in passing say, I'm going to do this, they have to accomplish that. That is the biggest priority. So they will procrastinate or put aside any personal stress relieving, self-care, personal goals, anything to meet other people's expectations or the things that other people need of them. This is very easy to fall into when you are a mother, or you are a teacher, or you are in a you're in a field or a position in life where you are serving other people all the time, and it's difficult to take that step back to work on you and to work on meeting your own expectations and brainstorming those areas of accountability that you need to apply to those goals in order to reach them. So once we understand, so for me, one of the reasons why I get 3 workouts in a week is because I'm recording them live. If we're being completely honest, if I did not have those live recordings, I cannot guarantee I would work out 3 times a week. I would probably work out 1 or 2, because constantly my mind is, I need to serve my clients. I need to serve I need to work on my membership portal to make that better for my clients, so it's providing them more value. I'm focusing on them, which is not at all a bad thing. But I can sometimes focus too much on that and lose sight of my own personal goals and expectations for myself. So be very careful with that if you are an obliger. Obligers also can very easily be exploited by other people or taken advantage of by other people, because they are constantly focused on on meeting the expectations of others. They're not great at setting boundaries. They're not great at saying no, because again, their people pleaser mentality forces them to feel that they need to meet other people where they are, rather than other people coming to meet them, if that makes any sense. So they're the people who are always giving, they're always contributing, they're always serving, giving of their time, of their energy, of their money, of their food, of their alcohol, whatever that looks like. They're always wanting to be that person. I'm going to provide for you. You can come over, hang out at my house. They're going to have a great time. They're great at throwing parties. I will say that. They love throwing parties because they love seeing people have fun in their home, in that atmosphere. But sometimes it can become overwhelming because they're constantly focused on caring for others rather than themselves. So be very careful with that. Some likely strengths of obligers is they are extremely reliable. They're very, very loyal friends, and sometimes to a fault. They're responsible for, especially when it comes to meeting external expectations, they're responsible. They're very adamant about making sure that happens. And then they have, they're team players. They're great bosses, leaders. They care for their employees. They're very adamant about showing that to their employees. With their team members, they feel great obligation to meet other people's expectations, like I said, and they're willing to go the extra mile to do so. They're willing to commit higher levels of attention to meeting other people's expectations. And some weaknesses that keep in mind, as I mentioned some of these briefly. They can become resentful about what's being asked of them or putting themselves first. So it can be a subconscious resentment that builds up because they're focused on helping other people. And this is one that very easily can build up in moms and wives, because their children and their husbands are needing them to help lead or to help facilitate certain things. And it becomes almost a burden, not one that they consider a burden because they're like, oh, well, I have to serve my family. This is the job that I have right now. And it can very easily become their quote unquote purpose in life. And I deal with a lot of women who are coming out of that phase. They're coming into a season where they're not having to focus so much on their children. They can focus on themselves. And it's important to do that. And they're learning how to transition that mindset from constantly worrying about what other people are doing and how they can help them, and worrying more about how they can help themselves, because that does, and understanding, modifying that mindset towards what that personal progress can do for your family in the long run. Because if you are more in tune with your own body and your own mind and your spirit, then you are able to better serve other people. And that's something that us obligers don't remember very often, and it's important to have that external accountability, like a coach or a mentor or a workout buddy or a friend, a family member, someone who can remind you to take time for yourself every now and again. And in the same way, learning to set boundaries when it comes to saying no or not committing to helping someone out as often, or not allowing yourself to be bogged down by surrounding yourself with people who are dramatic and they just pour their troubles on you all the time, and it's causing you stress, and both mentally and emotionally, because maybe you're an empath and you're very sensitive to other people's emotions. So it's important to be aware of how you are sensitive, how you are affected by this tendency, and in what ways of your life you need to adjust so that you are not that you are working towards your greatest good, rather than just sustaining a level of okayness while you're helping everybody else succeed. All right, our goal is not to just survive, but to thrive, and in order to do that, you have to put some actual intention into working on you rather than just helping other people. Okay, so going for our last one here, we have rebels. So dealing with a rebel, they just resist all expectations. So these are the people who are motivated most by oh, well, you won't ever do anything with your life. And then they go and they do something with their life simply because someone told them they weren't going to be able to succeed. So that goes for anything, regardless of whether, so if this is your tendency, some of the best ways to motivate you is going to be that, I guess, not negative enforcement, but you will probably benefit from having some avenue of your life where people don't think that you can lose the weight, or they don't think that you can stick with your diet, or they don't think that you can be healthy or healthful in your choices. So using that as a motivation to prove someone wrong is probably going to benefit a rebel, while it wouldn't as much benefit other personality or other tendencies. Okay, so rebels resist expectations. They put a high value on freedom, choice, expression, authenticity. They're very adamant about, I am who I am, and if you don't like that, I'm sorry. You know what I mean? And I definitely feel that I have a little bit of rebel in me. I think we all have a little bit of rebel in us in certain things, in certain areas of our lives. I definitely feel that I have more rebel in me because of, this is my entrepreneurial side. The same 8-year-old who mom told me specifically not to go sell snow cones door to door, yet I did, and I made a couple of dollars, but I had to bring them back because I literally went just directly against what she said. And I was a whole lot more of a rebel when I was younger. I've grown out of some of those tendencies, but I still value that choice of freedom and self-expression. So with rebels, if somebody asks them to do something specifically, if they're very specific, rather than it being a suggestion of, hey, I think it may be a good idea to do this, what do you think? Asking their opinion, rather than that was going to benefit you more and you're going to be able to communicate with a rebel better than if you were to try and impose your beliefs or impose your thought process or what you think is going to be worthwhile or the best way to do something they're a work smarter, not harder kind of vibe. So you have to be very careful with the way that you phrase things, because they may simply hear it and process it differently than the way you intended and go completely the opposite direction simply because they have the opportunity to. So be careful with how you're wording your phrases for rebels. Also, questioners and rebels, you will clash at times, depending on your personality types and other factors. A lot of questioners have a little bit of rebel in them as well, and some questioners. It depends on who you are. But what I have seen, everybody has a little bit of rebel in them, and those questioners can bring out a lot of the negative traits of rebels. So be very careful, questioners. Another thing that rebels are a little bit known for is they may be easy to manipulate by using their spirit of resistance. So that "I'll show you" mentality, or "watch me achieve," or "you can't make me" mentality. If you're trying to correct a rebel child, then allowing them to make the decision and taking away that audience factor, you're not watching them make the choice, because then if you have an audience, there are expectations. So if there's no audience, there's no expectations. So keeping that in mind when you're talking with a rebel or trying to discipline a rebel child. Another thing would be that they may choose to act out of love or a sense of mission or belief. So they have that heartfelt loyalty mentality as well as the obligers, but they can sometimes take that to an extreme. So it's something to watch. They may have trouble telling themselves what to do because, like I said, they resist not only external expectations, but also their own expectations for themselves. So they may find it difficult because they're like, well, I shouldn't eat this food, but I want to, and I'm going to do what I want. So instead of having that mentality of, oh, I shouldn't eat this, that restrictive mentality, it's very helpful for rebels to transition that thought process to more of a restorative mentality. And that's why I do address that with controlled eating patterns, and I do have a podcast on that specifically. But focusing on this rebel mentality, it's better to adjust your mindset rather from a restrictive to a restorative mentality. Rebels may love to meet a challenge in their own way and their own time. They prefer courses of study that maybe are more online or more flexible because they want to be able to set their own pace. They like to have everything laid out in front of them to where they can make the decision, and they know that the decision is up to them rather than up to somebody else. They don't always respect or respond well to supervision or a boss or a teacher, so they may question a lot of different things just for the sake of questioning, or for the sake of being that rebel in the room. A lot of rebels do like the fact that they are rebels. They kind of revel in their rebel, and they have a lot of confidence in that because it will help to drive them in their future. But it is important that rebels are conscious of the negative factors and those weaknesses, because it's not necessarily them who will be affected, but it's other people who may be affected by their rebel weaknesses. All right. So some of those weaknesses are that they're very resistant to pretty much everything. They struggle with repetitive or mandatory tasks because of that mindset of obligation. They don't like to feel obligated. They have an aversion to restrictions. So it's something to keep in mind. If you put restrictions on them or you put restrictions on yourself and you are a rebel, it's not going to end well. So if you are aware of that, then you can figure out how to strategize in a better way. They act as though ordinary rules don't apply to them. Other people's rules, other people's opinions, other people's feelings don't apply to them. So be careful about that. They can get very restless and may find it difficult to stay settled in a job or a relationship or some specific, well, whether it be a religion or a belief, or they have a hard time sticking with stuff because they always want to find that new, fresh insight, and they want to do things their own way. As soon as they feel that they're put into any sort of a category or a stereotype, they're going to rebel completely from that. They don't want to be stuck in that quote unquote stereotype. So they want to do as much as they can to cause other people not to see them that way. And they're also repelled by routine and planning. So this can be difficult for a rebel to stay motivated, to stay accountable, so that you have to get really, really creative on what ways you can motivate yourself. And this may be forms of reverse psychology on yourself. That's honestly, reverse psychology is the best form of working with a rebel. And if you're in a long-term relationship or in a work situation, the people that you're working with or your partner in that relationship is probably an obliger. So obligers and rebels tend to help each other out a little bit, but you have to be careful, rebels, because you can very easily become the dominant person in a relationship and cause that obliger to feel insufficient or inadequate in a lot of ways, or that relationship becomes solely about what you want or what you're striving for rather than the joint goals of both of you. So be very careful that you not only understand your own personality type and your own tendency, but also that you understand your partners or the people that you are around on a daily basis. A couple of strengths of rebels is that they are extremely independent-minded. They're able to think outside the box, come up with those new, work smarter, not harder kind of things. They're not swayed by conventional opinions or social standards. They actually will do their best to rebel from those standards and create their own understanding, their own truths. And they're also very in touch with their authentic desires. So rebels are dreamers. They're adamant about making sure that they are working towards what they want rather than what somebody else wants of them. But sometimes what they want can get twisted around, and they can feel that they're putting themselves under pressure and subconsciously resist those goals simply because they feel that sense of restriction again. So rebels, biggest advice for you would be to be able to very quickly identify those areas where you feel restriction and to transition that mindset to see how you can see it in a new light where you're not going to rebel from it, especially when it comes to personal goals. This is very important. Understanding why it is benefiting you, why you want this to happen, and why nobody else wants this. It's not about anybody else. It's about what you want. And maybe even trying to use some of those reverse psychology elements towards yourself. I know I'm all about self-talk and encouraging yourself with notes and that kind of thing. But if you would benefit as a rebel from writing something about nobody in your family thinks that you can do it, or nobody in your friend group thinks you can stick to this diet, prove them wrong. Like using those elements of motivation, of that reverse psychology motivation, use that to your benefit if you understand that you're a rebel, and that's going to help you out. All right. So the goal here with understanding our tendency or our tendencies, because you may have more than one, and if you take the quiz, you should be able to have a better idea of what your type is if you haven't already figured it out just by listening to the podcast today. So a couple of things I do want to go over real super quick is from this, how do we strategize a response? So we talked about tendencies, and I know we're getting a little bit long here, guys, but I want to talk really quick about strategy from this point. So we've identified those stressors in our life. We've identified your tendency and how you respond to expectations. And now it is how you're going to respond in the specific action points that you're going to make in your life. So if you use your worksheet, if you're a part of my VIP and Up program, you use your worksheets, you should have a column on the right side of your sheet that it has a 1, 2, 3 steps of creating that change, strategizing your response or strategy for success. So if you are using these, if you're thinking about certain stressors and you know this stressor, you know why it is affecting you, why it's causing you pain, pressure, stress of any kind, and then understanding your tendency and how that plays along with it, that is going to help you understand how to break down your action steps. So last week we talked about writing down your specific stressor or the things that you need to either release, repair, or overcome. And we broke them down into those categories. So from that point, we figured out why it was that was affecting you negatively. And then this is the point of action. So I'm going to give you an example here. Let's say that I need to release the fear of what others think of me. And why does this need to be released? Because it truly keeps me from being able to act and live authentically. That's something that's very important to me. So steps to creating positive change, if I'm going 1, 2, 3, my first step of action is going to be writing myself reminders of how strong, fierce, independent, confident, even if I don't believe that yet, I'm going to write myself reminders because I, for one, know that I need, I am an obliger, so I'm going to need some of that external accountability in addition to this. So understanding that tendency, if I am a rebel, I'm going to write some of those, maybe some of those notes that help me to keep in mind all of those people who don't think that I can succeed. If I'm a questioner, I'm going to write down all of the reasons why I find it important and why it's so important to me to be able to live authentically and to release this fear. And then there's also going to be, if you have that upholder mentality of just writing down the things that you want to work on, that fear, maybe writing down of, okay, this fear does not make sense, and this is why, for your questioner. And then for your upholder, writing down all those things that you want to accomplish in the day that help you feel that feeling of accomplishment or release that feeling of fear. So getting creative with it, understanding your tendency and your mentality behind these goals or these stressors that need to be released or repaired or overcome. Next up, I'm going to wear clothes that I feel fierce in rather than the ones that I need any outside approval. So this is going to help me to release that fear of what other people think, simply because I am doing what I choose to do. I am making that choice for myself. So this could go along with all kinds of different tendencies. The third practice would be to identify fear on a regular basis, practicing that, regularly acknowledging it and releasing it right away. Because if I am aware that fear tends to bog me down and to really affect the way that I treat people, the way that I go about my life, then I know that this is not beneficial for me. It logically doesn't make sense, and I know that it doesn't feel good. So both of those can contribute to me understanding, okay, I'm going to acknowledge this feeling. I'm going to choose to release it right away. So when I have these action steps, first of all, writing down my stressor, it helps to, materialize it a little bit more, make it a little bit more attainable to overcome. And then breaking it down into, okay, this is why it's not benefiting me. And these are the reasons, these are the ways that I'm going to go about transitioning this. I'm taking action. So what I want you to do is pick some of those top stressors, maybe your top 5, and see how those are affecting your life and how you can transition those to benefit you, using your knowledge of how you've worked in the past, how you've accomplished your goals and how you've not accomplished your goals in the past, what's worked and what hasn't. And in addition to that, what your tendency is when it comes to how you respond to expectations. Having all of that in your mind, it's going to give you a little bit more power to strategize, plan it out, how you are going to learn to release, repair, or overcome this stressor or this thing that burdens your life. And then the step 3 of this is to actually take action and do these things. Because you can plan all day long, but if you don't actually take action, you are not going to see results. So again, this is not about perfection. It's not about having this down pat right away. It is going to take time. It's going to take strategy. It's going to take consistency. And I like to say clarity plus consistency equals progress. It's a very simple equation. It's not going to be, there's nothing about perfection in there. There's nothing about having to meet somebody else's expectation, because these are expectations you're setting for yourself. Okay, these are specific internal expectations of what you want to accomplish in the near future and how you want to go about doing that. All right, so I hope that this wasn't too super long. I'm sorry we went over a little bit, but I had a lot I wanted to talk about this week. Make sure that you do the quiz. That is your challenge for this week. To do the quiz, I'm going to link in the bottom here. And if you haven't listened to the other podcasts in this series, go ahead and click on those links. I will link in the description box below. That is it for today. Please keep your eye out for next week's video, continuing our series on managing stress. Always remember to be the impact in the world around you, and maybe to someone who might need a little encouragement this week. Thank you for joining me for this Raw Reflections podcast, and I will see you next time.